Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining. We've started at Kelp Aikyam a new series called Aikyam. Aikyam in Sanskrit means unity. The idea was to bring in the stalwarts of the industry together and to understand what is happening around, okay, to hear at the ground, to get the feelers and kind of create a ripple effect so that across not only India, but globally, people are listening and understanding what really needs to go in to make a place which is safer, which is thriving, right? So we said, why not start with a very pertinent topic? And as all of you all can see, safety and respect at workplace, that is our first topic. And our first set of guests here are Shanta Valluri Gandhi and Suchismita Burman. I'm going to give you a short introduction of both of them. So Shanta here is a transformational leader with over 30 years of experience across the BFSI, fintech, technology sectors. She has held senior roles, including she's a founding member and former CHRO at RBL Bank, where she was part of the core team that rebranded Ratnakar Bank into RBL Bank. Shanta has extensive expertise in HR, DEI, internal branding, and CSR, and has driven large-scale transformation initiatives, including leading the HR function and setting up talent management, leadership development, and diversity programs. She also served as a Chief People Officer at InSolutions Global Limited, a leading provider of payment solutions, and Chief Transformation Head at AGD Biomedicals. Shanta's leadership extends to her board memberships, including TMI Group, Tappets Technology, FinPay, and Age Care Labs, where she contributes to business strategy and governance. Additionally, she's a trustee at Suryoday Trust, focused on skilling specially abled children, and a Rotary Club of Mumbai Inspire. Her hands-on leadership skills, deep commitment to DEI, and passion for creating sustainable social impact makes her highly respected in the industry. She also runs a trans cafe in Mumbai, which is very interesting, and I think we should be able to visit it someday soon. Welcome, Shanta. I hope I have done justice to your introduction.
Thank you, Smita. I think it was longer than I expected, and it's a pleasure to be here, Smita. Thanks for this.
Thank you. I think I can read more pages, but for the sake of time, and thank you for coming in for this series of Aikyam, which when I spoke to you, you were more than delighted, and you said, let's contribute back to the society, and thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
I also have with me Suchismita Burman. She's a seasoned HR leader with over 25 years of experience across global technology firms. Suchismita founded her consulting firm Be Inspired. When she said Be Inspired, I was like, wow, I was so excited with the name. In May 2022, focusing on building people capabilities, processes, and adoption of practices across growth stage startups and organizations through bespoke consulting. She has held key leadership roles in ITC Infotech, Deloitte Consulting, Cognizant Technology, and AOL India. Okay. As a former CHRO of ITC Infotech, she led global talent strategies during critical business transformations, focusing on capability building, cultural change, and HR tech adoption. Her expertise spans in M&A integration, organizational structuring, leadership pipeline development, and technology-driven HR solutions. Suchismita is also a certified OD consultant and life coach, helping companies and individuals unlock their potential through strategic HR interventions. Known for driving high-performance cultures and fostering inclusion, she continues to influence the HR landscape in tech sector through her consulting work with startups and established organizations alike. Suchi, I hope I have done justice to your introduction. I was, two power women in the house. So.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. And Smita, thank you for reaching out and pleasure to be here. And let's see how this conversation helps to further the cause that you have in mind. So happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And when I messaged Suchi, she was like, yes, let's do it. So I was so happy that as soon as I reached out to the two of them, they were more than happy to give back and appreciate all your support. So
Thank
let's
you.
get started.
It's a power. You're also a very important woman on the forum, yeah? Just not the
Thank
two.
you.
Makes more than two of us. There are many good women on the who have also dialed in. So it's a happy place.
Absolutely. And they are all looking forward for a great discussion. What we also want to tell the audience is here that please start putting your questions, your thoughts. So Suchi comes from technology and Shanta comes from BFSI, two really large sectors where many women join, right? Now, if you look at the gender diversity also at least in the beginning, in the freshers to mid management, technology runs up to 30 to 40%. Even BFSI is not behind. But I think something happens or the numbers dwindle as they go up there. So we need to understand what is it that happens. So this conversation today is to reflect and compare workplaces across these industries. So we need to understand whether it is geography, whether it is working condition, what are those contributing factors, or what are those factors that push back people from various aspects not being in the system or maybe dropping off, right? So I'll start with inviting Shanta first, if she has to say any few words to get started, or I can start posing questions. Likewise, after that, maybe Suchi.
So, Smita, there are a lot of things happening today, and, social media also contributes heavily. So I think we are getting to know more than we need to know sometimes. And that's probably also causing a little bit of unrest on many people. And therefore, when you put out a post which says that we're talking about safety at workplace, you also find a lot of people interested in joining in. Because everybody wants to know what are the best practices, because some of us do experience, we've all worked, 30 plus years, it's always been a safe place to work. So where does this question of safety at workplace come? Obviously, there are some unanswered questions, and therefore it'll be interesting to hear Sushmita also, because between the two of us, we have experiences, and each of us may learn in this process as well, and also learn from the audience. So I urge everybody in the audience to please post as many questions as possible so that we start somewhere. And if you
Sure.
want to get specifically focused on BFSI, I would leave the questions to you, Smita, to get rolling. And, I'd be happy to answer each one of them.
Absolutely. Suchi, you want to say anything at the beginning?
Now I think we are good. So let's roll.
All right. So question for you, Suchi, then. When you think of safety and respect within workplace, what are some of the things that come to your mind? And how was your industry and how organizations that you've worked with or in the past addressed these aspects for you?
Sure. And an important context setting question, I would say. The way I would think about it is, if you're really looking at safety and respect, right, there are three levels that we're talking about. One is a human level, which is your physical, mental, and emotional. And when you're talking about respect, I would look at it from three aspects. How is it that you define and understand boundaries, and how is it played in the organization ecosystem, professionalism, and well-being? Now, what I have observed while working and then consulting across various organizations, across various geographies, again, in the technology element of it, is that feeling of safety and inclusion and respect has a lot to do with predictability and consistency, right? And this is where workplace culture plays such an important role. And technology organizations are fostering a respectful work culture for a very long time. What I'm seeing happen more explicitly is setting clear expectations for behavior, strengthening of the channels for employees, not only to report issues, but most importantly, being able to use these opportunities of issue resolution to actually handle systems, processes, structure, everything to do with how is it that humans can actually work better together. The other element, and two things that I'm seeing, and which is true across all sectors, is how you actually bring in digital safety and digital trust. And this is where organizations are developing frameworks to make sure that it's a safe online environment for people. Because now that you're working remotely in hybrid work conditions, which possibly is here to stay, how do you combat online harassment? How do you combat misinformation like bullying, tagging for unrelated issues, and allowing people to understand what choices do they have is going to become more and more important in a changed work environment today. The last is about ethical technology. And there is so much of conversation happening about the ethical guidelines for AI as an example, which is just one of the example. If you talk about deep fake as an emerging technology, how do you prevent misuse? And this is where technology organizations are necessarily coming together. Thought leadership is happening within those organizations to see how can we create a safe and respectful workplace.
So brilliantly said. I mean, technology, of course, working across the digital space, ethical space. Coming to Shanta, I think that is where BFSI as a, the cornerstone of BFSI as an industry is, right? So what do you think about creating safety and respect within workplace? Yes.
It's a very interesting.
What comes to your mind?
Suchi, for setting the context. I think you almost covered every aspect, but I'll just stay with two minimalistic ones. As a practitioner, I looked at two areas. One was physical safety and one was psychological safety. I think for us, the focus in BFSI, see, fortunately in BFSI, we work with people's money. So it's a business of trust. Integrity, ethics, etc., are a part of the trust, that's why people come and put money with us, right? It's a practical problem. So from a physical safety perspective, thankfully, because we are in this business, we already have surveillance, we have CCTVs, we have, all kinds of reporting that happens in a physical infrastructure. Because today, even if you collect money from a customer and you deposit it, that is also captured on CCTV cameras, because you have to eventually show this as part of regulation. So luckily for us, if I have to look at the branch network, everything is under surveillance. Everything is systematized because we work on an EOD, end of day process. So everything has an audit trail. Everything is under the governance technologies. And therefore, we probably from a physical safety perspective, because we are in an environment which is controlled, we've been probably luckier and ahead of the curve compared to other industries. I think the bigger challenge for us when we as bankers began our careers 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, our lives were very different compared to the psychological safety that we see today. You know that we work in a very high stress environment. On paper, bankers are supposed to be 9 to 5. The truth is, we are never 9 to 5. We work long hours. We work, we meet customers at their working points, right? Because our people also visit customers. So there is a space which is where the physical safety and the psychological safety probably undergo a lot of compromise, because they're leaving the premises to meet a customer if it's a sales job. I think so for us, the psychological safety became a larger drive-in, especially during the COVID era, because people did find mental health issues and things like that. And a lot of investment we did for mental health. Having a psychiatrist and a psychologist on call also became a need of the hour, because people who were working from home, working from offices, we had our own set of challenges. As a practitioner, I think we moved beyond physical safety to actually looking at psychological safety in the BFSI space. And I'm very happy to see what Suchi spoke about, the data security, the AI, ML. There's so much happening, including ethical, because every action that you do today, there is a reaction which is outside of your purview. I mean, anybody can be cloned today, anybody can be cloned. What about those safety measures? I think at organization level, we've controlled it a lot more versus when we go into our personal domain. So my personal investments in my career was more on the psychological part of it. In the later part of my career, we started with the physical part of it, which was basically safety at workplace. So I would like to just bring this perspective, because I think most of the points got covered by Suchi. It just would be very, very repetitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shanta, what I realize is BFSI has been like more than, it has been existing since I think 100 years now. It is a very long drawn journey. Like, 9 to 5, as you mentioned rightly, we remember as the bank would just shut shop and everybody would leave. There used to be a proper lunch break. I don't think it exists anymore, right? The bank wouldn't function before 8:30. If you go, the shutters would be down. But now you are like 24/7. And coming to technology sector, which is new age, which came with this. When they entered the market, their working hours were not set. They came with much later. Of course, the technology space came much later. So they were already there, and the recruitment also happened with that mind space. But it did not for BFSI. I think you all really had to travel. Okay, so that is important. So, Shanta, I would want to ask
I'll
you
just
this
add one
question.
thing. Smita, I'll just add one dimension to everything that you said. See, what's happening, and Shanta spoke about it, right? What we traditionally knew and had a perception of BFSI, with the advent of fintech, I think there has been a lot of integration and a lot of necessarily reimagining of safety, respect, everything. It's converging. And the way I think about this is it's an opportunity for us to be able to really look at how do we play a role in making sure that you're actually amplifying on the opportunity, not necessarily eroding from it, right? Because there are so many challenges coming through.
Absolutely, said it so beautifully, amplifying it rather than eroding. Okay, you have to look at the future and figure out what are those things that now you need to build in, get in more systems in place.
Are we losing Smita?
Earlier, maybe a mistake, an ethical slip up would have been.
Yes, Smita.
I think if you can let her know that the network is dipping for her and if she can shift the network.
I think we lost Smita. Can you hear me, Suchi?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think it's her network.
I'm speaking to Smita, just a second.
Yeah, just.
Hello, can you hear me? I can see your. Hello.
Hello.
Smita, is there a
I'm audible
possibility?
now, yeah.
Yeah, Smita, is there a possibility for you to change the network because the network is dipping for you?
I think she's dialing back in.
Ah, sure.
Or you may want to get off camera in between if your broadband gets affected.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
I don't know at what point you all missed me.
I think you were asking a question to Shanta, and I think you dropped there. We were not able to hear.
All right. All right. So, Shanta, I wanted to just understand, just extending what you said about BFSI space, that as a leader, do you see a correlation between prioritizing safety and respect and employee morale and productivity? I mean, how do you think we can either work together with it, or one is looked at differently by the other?
You know, it's very clear, Smita. I mean, it's a no-brainer. A happy employee is the most productive employee at the workplace. And how does it actually translate? You know, if you look at the BFSI sector, it's a very vertical organization. While there are lateral influences and, you know, where we would see horizontal leadership, it's a very vertical way of doing things. So one of the things that we realized very early on, in fact, I won't even say it's a new age learning. I used to manage this whole team of some 20,000 people in ICICI Bank. And I had, being the woman leader, managing these people across the length and breadth of the country, they were all spread. One of the things that we realized was the line managers play a very important role in creating a safe environment for their employees. Whatever may be the physical safety and the psychological safety that you created, a grievance redressal in the organization, or you created a help desk, or you created a posh committee, you created everything. But at the end of the day, the line manager did not know the basic tenets of who you are. So one of the things, I like to quote something which happened in my last, organization. I was addressing a group of people where we had a town hall. And somebody in that group at the end of the town hall, either the audience felt that they could speak to me. We are a hierarchical organization, right? All of us believe we sit at a particular level. The last denominator in the company will not even walk up to you after a town hall. There was one young girl who walked up to me and said that I want to talk to you. Okay. And, I want to have a conversation with you. And I said, what is it about? And she felt disrespected at workplace by her supervisor. And she thought it's important to raise this opportunity to talk to me about it. Now, how do you think that she thought it was an open door policy? Because one of the things that we did very, very well, and I think it was a borrowed thing from ICICI, which I implemented in my last organization, was leadership trainings. Because sometimes the values that you throw up on your walls, how does that converge to action at the ground? It happens either through case studies or through continuous awareness. You can't just keep saying, we believe in respect.
Yes.
So we drove something which I implemented in my last organization was the CEO Awards. The CEO Awards is basically a reflection to say that you will be at a CEO Award when you have displayed the values of the organization for your performance. Because today, if you open social media, you will also see a lot of bankers talk about, being rudely talking to their employees. You're seeing all of that, right? Today, many banks, this is happening. And these get recorded both for private and public sector, and they're playing everywhere. The fact of the matter is that if I'm going to start rewarding for respect, and how do I reward for respect? Because you have surveys that you do, you have ways and means to find out whether people are misbehaving, like a manager's scorecard. We had a fantastic thing which we did for Great Places to Work, right? That there's a survey which you can attend. And then you can do a manager's scorecard and give back feedback. So when you look at respect and when you look at safety, these are tenets of which an organization, an employee, whether man or woman, just feels comfortable to come into work and becomes productive. So for me, these are definitely correlated. And we cannot divorce both of them separately. They have to be there together. If there is no happy employee, you do what you want. You're not going to get productivity, even if you're going to increase that person's compensation 10 times over. You know that, Smita, you work with so many organizations. We drive so much on inclusion, and without this basic tenets of respect at workplace, you're not going to get the best out of your people, however small the denominator may be in the company, including a janitor.
Absolutely, Shanta. Sorry, did I talk over you?
No, it's okay, Smita. I think the point is that if you don't respect a person, you're not going to get the desired productivity. So safety is also a fallout of respect. Yeah. If I respect this person's opinion, I respect this chair, I'm going to address my problem without any fear to this person. And how does that come? That comes when leaders speak, when leaders walk the talk. I think that's a very important part about how we build an organization to be a safe place, not just painting the walls or implementing the most high-end technology at the end of it all.
Absolutely. Shanta, what you spoke is bang on because I also strongly believe that, if you don't have safety and respect, that goes along. Employee productivity is at high. But I also get a lot of pushback. I get pushback saying, okay, we are only speaking about creating safe workplace. We are not, there needs to be a carrot and stick being more longer, right? Toxicity. So what is stick? Basically toxicity, and toxicity does not go well with employee safety and respect. So that is such a mesh. It gets very difficult to communicate sometimes with these folks when we are speaking in the space of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, because it's all stemming from there. Where there's no respect, they think the productivity is going to be high. You have to show the stick. So Chi, same question to you. What do you think about it?
So I would say the first is yes. Is there a correlation? Absolutely yes. Now, if you look at in the technology environment, right, technology sector, it's really people and the mind share that you're working with are your biggest assets. So allow me to share a perspective, and I have been thinking about it for a very long time, right, and observing in communities and organizations. And I think this correlation is about how do you deal with privileges. And when I say that, what I mean is how you claim a privilege versus how you share the privilege is what draws the correlation of safety, respect, and employee morale and productivity. So, see, one, as far as privilege is concerned, is an explicit privilege of positional power. And then there is the other more subtle and yet very powerful privilege of intellect and access to credible information. Otherwise, information is everywhere today, right? The question is access to credible information. Now, what I have seen in, again, technology environment, microcultures being built across project or program teams. And wherever I have seen a microculture of project managers or program managers, and I'll give you an example, in a technology environment, working in a bench or being put on a bench is like a taboo. It's such a huge issue. And Shantak, she talks about psychological safety. It's such an environment, the structural environment that doesn't allow for psychological safety, right? But in that environment, I have seen leaders who are actually creating this microculture where the leader actually adopts a coaching style so that he is able to create a psychological safety for the team, people who are there to claim that privilege of knowledge, outcome, productivity, learn more, necessarily go and even ask the leaders, hey, you know what, I'm interviewing, but this leader is not accepting me, versus somebody hiring from somebody from outside, the leader picking up the phone. And this is where how you actually leverage social capital within your leadership network becomes so important. And that's where I think if we have more leaders who are able to do that, especially in environments where it is very competitive, fend for yourself approach, who will always stand out. It takes time, right? However, it will attract curiosity. And that's where when you ask the question, is there a correlation? Absolutely, yes. So it is not easy. But the game is about how do you really claim a privilege, share a privilege, and draw the correlation that is going to actually become important.
Thank you, Shuchi. Sorry, because of bandwidth, I'm just putting my video off, if that is okay.
Absolutely.
So what I heard is that about privilege, and everybody has to understand where they come from, what space that they come from. Absolutely agree, and I like that perspective very, very much. So I want to know from you, Shuchi, then I heard HR compliance to create that safe workplace. So who do you think is responsible for driving a safe and respectful workplace? Primarily, who is responsible for driving that culture?
I would say everybody. Nobody is outside of it, because the only point is each one of us have a role to play and accountable towards it. So if you talk about leadership, if you talk about HR, if you talk about compliance, each of us have a role to play, right? A piece of that puzzle that comes in together. I will say this though. So what happens is in HR's role, and most importantly, and I have seen this with myself, sometimes you're going to be put in difficult spots. And how you show up in those difficult spots to be able to really draw boundaries and stand up for what is right. And this is not necessarily just a transactional role. This is where your trust equation, your ability to be able to influence minds becomes so important. So when you ask the question saying who is accountable, the answer is everybody. But as an HR leadership, I think, right, it's important to be able to really measure the outcome and how accountability plays out. I'll give you an example, right? And this was in a situation where there was a presentation of issues related to DEI, and it was being presented to the board. And one of the inferences which came to the board saying, okay, this is a finding that we got. However, the CEO believed otherwise. And as a result, we took into account what he had to say, and here is the revised findings. I really respect that board. The board says, sorry, that's not what is your role requires you to do. Your role requires you to appreciate the CEO is just one stakeholder, not necessarily the decision maker. right? So for me, so when you say accountability, who's responsible, that's what is leadership. So that's what I feel. It actually works both ways. First of all, for us not to be cowed down just because somebody else in the hierarchical power has some other responsibility that necessarily doesn't play in to a certain context of a DEI or an issue resolution that another party has been made responsible for. So that's the way I look at it. Being accountable, knowing what is the outcome, and being able to stand your ground.
Absolutely. Bang on. Shanta, what do you think? What she just added?
I would
What is
definitely,
your perspective here?
I would like to add on Suchi. See, I just want to ask you the simple question. I'm reversing the question. In a family, if there was an alcoholic father who beat up the mother every day, do we ask anybody, you know, about safety, respect, and things like that? Maybe a teenage girl will get up, who's the daughter, to support her siblings or her mother. It's collective leadership, yeah. It doesn't really matter who it is. It's all about everyone putting their hand out and saying, I have a common goal. I have to get this place safe. I have to get respected. And I have to get people to align to one common culture in the company. I think cultures come over decades in an organization. And when Suchi was alluding to microcultures, when you allow microcultures to breed, even in a family, you try breeding a microculture and you see what a mess you make at home. You try breeding a microculture. So I just think this whole thing about if we all don't believe, and I'm telling you, these may sound philosophical, but they can be driven. If at an organization, some behaviors are considered stopper behaviors and appraisals are also docked, people will understand that this behavior is unacceptable behavior in the company. When you reward for good behavior and so in banks we have something called staff accountability. Okay, we have committees which actually decide whether this behavior is acceptable or not acceptable. It's serious business. It's regulated. The regulator asks you for reports on accountability of staff. And that's when you realize that when you bring in that kind of seriousness over governance, when you can't, some cultures need governance because, especially our industry, we deal with people's money, we deal with trust. Our whole business is about trust. We can't even for a minute tell somebody who walks into our organization or into the bank branch to say, sorry, we ran out of money today. We can't give you, right? We can't do that. In any other industry, if the systems are down, you can at least say, I'm sorry, my systems are down. It doesn't matter whether your systems are down. If a person walks in for money, you better churn out the dosh and give him because that's his money. So if you give a culture and a freedom which is absolutely loose, you may actually land up in a situation that microcultures get defined at every branch, especially when we work in remote organizations. So therefore, there is a level of regulatory governance, Meeta, that does help in BFSI at least to create a common culture on certain areas which are governed. And certain areas which are not governed is where a leadership comes into the picture. So if you ask me, posh, is there any negotiation on posh? No, there is no negotiation on posh. It's a controlled regulatory environment. Is there negotiation on anything which is staff accountable, which is laid down by governance? No, there is no negotiation. We go by the rule book. But if you tell me that there's somebody in the branch who's getting harassed by her manager, and there is nobody to really support that person to feel safe or respected, or even give a culture of inclusion, then yes, we have our own forums. So we created technological options on the intranet and on the apps which were provided to come in, as long as they were anonymous. We also created a structure where, people could voice their opinions. So we did something called Our Voice. Now, what is Our Voice? Some leader from the company goes and talks at branch level to communicate to the branches on what is the culture of this organization. Who are we? And this was completely facilitated by HR. I truly believe leaders and line managers play a very important role in driving the culture of their units and their verticals. Cannot just rely on centralized forces like HR or compliance in isolation to do anything. We'll have to work as a team, and it's collective leadership and collective ownership that makes things happen. And that's how we've run in the BFSI space. I'm sure there must be some of them who are from the BFSI space. Happy to hear from them what they do and what can add on to my learning as well.
Absolutely. And bang on what you said, Shanta. And at Kelp, we have a lot of clients, both from BFSI and technology, and we are the vendor partners, right? We see sometimes toxicity at when they are speaking to us. We understand that maybe it's the culture of the organization. So at Kelp, we have consciously taken a stand saying we won't be working with those folks, right? And call it out, saying that these were the respectful behaviors and that's why we are stepping out. they they may want to take it in any way, but I think a message should go across. Even vendor partners should call out and say that, listen, or clients should call out and say, I'm not sure if clients face it, but whoever external parties also should call out, I think, that these are unacceptable behaviors and we won't work with such folks. I think that is one of the way that we have taken up very clearly. So thank you for that, Shanta. And I'm going to ask you if you have any characteristics that are unique to your industry that either help or hinder creating safe and respectful workplace, something that does extremely well for BFSI or something that is hindering the space.
Smita, we are a governed entity. And I keep saying this, that because we are a governed entity, we work within the tenets of governance and regulation to a large extent. Now, what could hinder? Typically, we are a remote organization, right? So there are a lot of people who work in remote locations and they create a little bit of their microcultures. Just going back to what Suchi spoke about. When you run, when you're a branch manager, you are de facto the CEO of the branch. And everything that you say or do, so whoever may be the CEO sitting wherever, it really doesn't matter to the customer who touches the branch at the ground level, right? For him, the branch manager is his only contact, who's the senior most person in that territory. Now, typically in those spaces, we do see some hindrance about the way we want to communicate to people. And the only way we've been able to reach that bunch of people is through trainings, awareness programs, having a grievance redressal forum, because grievance redressal is also an opportunity for us. We've also reached out through, we have a beat plan for all leaders in banking. So even if you're a zonal head or a regional head or a top leader, you need to travel to locations because everybody has to visit locations. So we used a lot of personal touch at various points of time. I also alluded to the fact that we did something called Our Voice. Basically, Our Voice was that we took a bunch of leaders. We do this talent management process, right, in all organizations. One of the biggest things about talent management process for us was you should know how to communicate to your people as well. So there may be a great talent at work, but doesn't know how to communicate. So one of the ways we used all these resources also was to be authentic in their leadership. When they visited a branch, to take information and come back and look for resolutions. And it works beautifully when there is a touch and feel and it's just not through technology. So while we did use apps, while we did use our intranet, our HRMSs for people to connect, it was always the personal connect and the line of leadership's authenticity. The other thing that I want to talk about, Smita, is that, we need to make some stories about how the organization helped when somebody was in a dire strait and how the organization allowed a person to come, whatever may be the level of that person to come. So we did create a lot of videos for communication purposes too, so that people see small videos just to know if they have a problem which is similar to the one we are talking about, then maybe there is an opportunity. The third and the most important thing is, Smita, we hire people like yourselves.
Thank
we have
you.
extensively partnerships with other providers, because what happens is there is a lot of neutrality when we look at people like Kelp or independent organizations who go and communicate to employees. You get the real picture. And last but not the least is an anonymous survey. And that's where I think HR plays a very critical role in facilitating these to ensure you get maximum participation. And when we looked at, one of the things we did very well was the manager scorecard. We brought the manager scorecard back into the goal sheet, and we started tracking that at the board level, representing as to how the manager scorecard played a very critical. So we took it at the business level. then went to the vertical level, and then actually went to the individual level. Any manager who led a team had a score to achieve because it would holistically add up to the overall score. And that is how we track, because what does not get measured, will never happen in an organization. So cultural measurements are very critical to be introduced, and organizations where there is toxicity, I think this is a very important task. And it worked beautifully for us because we were a startup bank, we were migrating, we had also acquired a foreign bank, and it was a complex cultures of sorts, and we worked beautifully on revamping our values and implementing that into the balance scorecard, as well as implementing it into our manager scorecard. So I think it played beautifully by using data, metrics, as well as leader speak sessions. It was a combination with a reward and recognition which was implemented. I'm sure all organizers, people come first at the end of the day. Our business is all about people.
Thank you for that. And I think in that you've also shared with us what communication training that is done. But I would want to hear from Shuchi before I come back to you, if there is anything that hinders or helps your industry in creating safety and respect at workplace.
Sure. So, and I love what Shanta was talking about, and I will possibly build on it from a technology standpoint. See, be it whichever industry, what is important is to recognize the signs of disrespect. And the signs of disrespect, unfortunately, doesn't look the same. It is not even similar. Right? It might have shades of similarity, but it is not similar because one is, of course, a threshold of what is acceptable and non-acceptable, right? So if you have, there are certain things which are absolute do or don'ts, right? I think over a period of time in the technology industry, because of so much of communication awareness, that part is largely understood. What is not understood and which has a tremendous ripple effect, positive and negative, in technology organizations is the constant interconnectedness. It's about collaborative workspace. It's a lights on culture. And being in a fast-paced industry, so what is happening is there is a need for instant gratification in every way, every day. So you are constantly running against client deliverables. There are issues on the production element, there are issues on testing, there are issues in terms of an innovation timeline that you're working on. So what happens is that you're prone to short-term decisions, you are prone to judgment errors, and there's an overall impatience in the system. And when you have an overall impatience in the system, as a result, safety and respect could be the fallouts. Now, what I am observing and what is happening in the technology industry, if you look at services, and again, if you look at the startup community as a whole, as I'm working through so many of these founders, so many of these organizations, which are medtech startups, if you look at any of the scaling startups that you're looking at, these founders and the co-founders are absolutely vigilant, and they know that it is a non-negotiated principle, right, in terms of building and say, and that's where they actually put their credibility at stake. They necessarily say, if you have, and when Shanta talks about saying leaders being available, right, that is something that is front and center in the way they drive communication. So when you ask the question saying, what are the characteristics that actually help or hinder, it is this interconnectedness, collaboration, lights on culture. In an environment like that, if you do not have a leadership team, and when I say leadership, not just the front line, it's essentially the mid-level people. And even employees are equal stakeholders. So what the technology organizations require and are constantly working on is how do we make employees at every level equal partners to be able to create an environment that actually helps. Because it is about sustaining the common rules and it's about changing mindsets. I'll give you a simple example, right? Suppose an employee is actually traveling abroad. Now, in an environment where you cannot necessarily really litter the place, you're supposed to necessarily keep that place clean. You cannot scream and shout. You cannot necessarily disturb the environmental peace. Some of these things are necessary because what will happen in that environment, the others who are around you might feel unsafe around you. So creating those common rules, understanding what it means to operate in a highly collaborative, interconnected work environment becomes a challenge as well as an opportunity for the technology sector.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And having, that is there, right? They have to ensure that they're working in such a space. While it is hindering them, it is also pushing them to do the right things. Absolutely. So, Shuchi, I'll start with you on understanding that do you all do anything specific, or how? I'm sure you all do, but in your industry, what do you think are those best ways of sensitizing or promoting safety at workplace? And do you do any communication training? Are the systems in place? And how often are they reinforced?
All right. So there are three things that I have observed technology organizations. I have done it in my roles, and when I consult with organizations, I see these three things having far more reach and acceptance in the way to promote that, right? One is role modeling, leading by example. How does demonstrating respectful behavior look like? Now, what happens, and especially when you are in a collaborative, interconnected, always lights on culture, everybody's observing everybody.
Yes.
So what happens is that role modeling is an opportunity and a challenge, which is where teaching people to be aware of your surroundings, especially leaders. What you say, every word that you speak, you need to be cautious about because people are observing you and doing interpretations. And some of these interpretations are never validated. It stays as an interpretation.
Yeah.
So what you can take control over is to actually control that narrative for interpretation. So role modeling. Second is feedback and communication. Now, what has happened is that, yes, the anonymous feedback, all that is there. What organizations have moved towards, see, the way you look at performance management processes. So organizations have moved to monthly check-ins. Organizations are focusing more on the process as well as the outcome. Not just the outcome, right? Organizations are focusing on how is it that you're actually building relationships. But Smita, bear in mind, it is also a function of how evolved the organizations are in their stage of product or service evolution.
Okay.
But you have to make sure that you're stable from a business standpoint. And what becomes extremely important is to actually do that continuous learning process. So where leaders communicate that they are learning, right? And I love the examples of, say, a Tesla organization or some of these, where the leaders actually put out the results of the 360-degree feedback that they're getting from these employees and how they're implementing it, right? And I always hold, and I'm sure it is true for all the big four, but I have been part of Deloitte, and the way we actually used to really look at role modeling to promote safety is put the leaders front and center, actually own the continuous learning engagement through the networks that they're responsible for. So how do you promote that learning culture within your networks is going to be the way for technology organizations, because everybody can't be everywhere. So you need to make sure that the role modeling is happening in such a manner so it's like a mirror and you create the ripple effect so that it helps.
Absolutely. Any specific things, Suchi, you want to share that works beautifully for technology, while a role modeling is, as you said, center and forward. But if you have to give 2, 3 insights that this works well for a technology company in creating safety and respect, would you have anything in your mind, top of your mind?
See, one of the things which is true for, I'm sure it happens in the BFSI space as well, role modeling. I talked about 3: role modeling, feedback and communication, and continuous learning.
Yes.
Now, how you do these things can actually have various forms. So let's say feedback and communication. What I have seen in organizations is actually use technology to do an ENPS score of sorts. Right? So essentially, how happy are you? How safe are you? Essentially, there are like these screens which are put on the entrance of the offices, and all the employees have to do is just swipe and put in that score and saying, okay, how do I feel today?
Brilliant. Yes.
Being able to use technology in a way so that you're able to mine that data. What I'm seeing, and it is a good thing, where you're using a lot of analytics data to be able to assess the mood, to find the trigger points. And like I said, right, what I'm observing is to be able to collect the data and then
Yes.
break it down at an individual, team, and a systemic level to define responsibilities. What is it that the organization would do is what I'm seeing really work very well on the feedback, on the communication part of it. The other, on a continuous learning process, it is beyond an e-learning, actually, if you ask me. It is beyond compliance. That is something that all organizations are doing today. So the continuous learning is, I go back to what Shanta was talking about. How do you bring success stories of expected behavior to the front? And that's where, when you actually have campaigns to be able to project the stories, reward people, and that is what organizations are doing today. And when I said the process as well as the outcome is important, that's what I meant. So the
All right.
rewards part of it is going beyond saying monthly rewards, quarterly rewards. Those are part of the process. But what is it that you're rewarding for is becoming more and more important for the organizations who want to promote the safety and inclusion and respect as a workplace brand.
Thank you. Thank you for clarification. Shanta, I'm coming to you on the same aspects. That what do you think works well in your industry in promoting safety and sensitizing, or if there, and how often do you think this needs to be reinforced?
Smita, people join organizations because they believe it's a safe place to work. That's a starting
Correct.
point. They also believe that it's a place where respect is there. Okay, these are basic tenets. I mean, even if you get married into somebody's house, you're going to look at this basic stuff, right? That I'm safe if I marry this guy, and this is a place where I get respected. Okay, so these are basics. So I think for me, it starts at induction itself, that I'm a safe place to work. So a lot of our programs very early on start at induction itself to say we're a safe place to work. And what is safety? And safety is different for different sets of people. I mean, if I come from a metro city, for me, visiting a client's office also is considered safe. There are in locations where we are in micro locations across the country, people are uncomfortable even visiting another person's house to sell a life insurance policy. How do I make that person feel safe? For me, is a larger challenge than what I would do through technology or through interface, leader speak, etc. in a metro city, or in a city which is accessible by road or by any other modes of transport. In a business where you have geographical expansion, which is right up to the remotest places of this country. Secondly, you may be working out of a client's office. Now, I may not have toxicity in my organization, but you are in a culture where you're placed there. Now, let me give you an example. When we look at third-party, we sell third-party products out of our branch premises, and we have a third-party provider who sits in our office. For that person, our organization is the place where he or she, that's her workplace. Now, my real challenge is, how do I make it safe for that person? Because I'm not their principal employer. Their principal employer is somebody else. And it has happened with us where we were not the principal employers, but something happened in our premises. What we did was we connected with the opposite person from that other organization, because actually the organization, we heard the ripples in the branch that this person was unhappy because of something that happened in the branch. I actually volunteered and spoke to their HR head and said, let's do a joint meeting with this girl. And our HRBP and their HRBP got together, got the lady into the room, and we had a conversation. Because sometimes you're sitting in locations, I'm sure in the tech companies also it's the same thing. You sit in locations which is not your own premises. I think, Smita, that's where our learning, awareness, communication, leaders speak actually don't work. They don't work. Where it works is where I'm connected, and therefore wherever I'm connected, communication has worked beautifully. In the induction, having stories of success and acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior has worked well. I told you we're a regulated entity and staff accountability is a very important part of it. So that works well. Grievance redressal works well for us. We have definitely done leaders speak by identifying leaders who are not necessarily vertical leaders, because you tend to speak well with non-vertical leaders sometimes when you want to share the most important problems of your life. So we've done that in closed user groups. We have done manager scorecards. We've done leadership surveys. We've also done personal people connect. I think that's a very important investment at the leaders level, which works well. Do all banks do it because of the size and scale? Smita, it's possible in a smaller bank. So what we did was we even recorded some of these live sessions and played it to the rest of the community as part of their programs. It was so critical for them to be involved in this whole process. So, Smita, communication, refresher, awareness, and partnership with Kelp kind of organizations definitely, I repeat, do reach the last mile more often. But if they're in another person's premises where you're the principal employer or somebody else is the principal employer, their culture does, seamlessly enter into our culture. And then there is a mesh of cultures. And that's where I think the problem starts. So the biggest challenge for anybody would be when you are inviting another company partner to become a part of your journey, how are you going to intermingle and get a standardized process for both sets of people in our premise?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't look at it only in isolation. There has to be a community that you're working with, and that is most important. Shanta, Suchi, I think I have covered most of the questions that I had got, but I would want to understand from both of you, and if you want to make it your closing statements, that is there any best practices that you want to leave the audiences with? And then we will jump to maybe questions, or we respond to their questions and then come back to the best practices. Okay. I think I'll take a shot. Let's respond to some questions which are here. So Savita, I'm going from down to up. Savita is asking, in progressive organizations like BFSI or technology companies, putting systems like scorecard is possible. But what happens in mid-sized organization where population is not very tech savvy or conversant with surveys, etc.? So you all have.
So,
Shanta, why don't you go first and then I'll.
Yeah. So let me quickly tell you that one of the things that I've realized in mid-size, now when you say mid-size, I'm assuming there is a population size inside the company. Is there any expected population size? Because see, I consult with a couple of companies on transformation. And it's true that, some of these companies don't even have an HRMS system. They don't have a technology-led process of communicating with their employees. But one of the things that I've realized that their leaders are very well entrenched with the quality of staff that they intermingle with. And for me personally, if there is a low budget organization who doesn't want to invest in technology, the biggest training you can do is for the people themselves. And training and communication, continuous awareness does play a critical role. And if budgets are low, please use technology. Please use e-learning modules and supplement it with success stories from leaders. So an audio, video, and a physical interface works beautifully with these companies. And I've tested it with some of these mid-sized organizations, and they work beautifully. And I'm truly telling you, as a practitioner who's driving it now from the outside in, I find this model effective when your budgets are low. You need to get those leaders to come in and become the spokesperson for the company and work within their regulatory frameworks. These are not necessarily BFSI. They are actually companies which are from totally different fields and different lines of business. And they have used their personal connects to communicate and also have what they call very smartly the grievance redressal forum. Unlike organizations which have large populations where there are grievance redressal forums, the HRBP or the HR representative actually doubles up to be the grievance redressal, and they have a fantastic metric of tracking the TAT of this complaint coming in to the complaint getting resolved. It's as simple as that. If you really want to have a culture of safety, respect, culture of being together in the same common outcome, which is sustainable, please use within your budgets available tools, because ultimately it's about authentic leadership that eventually works in these spaces. I can talk for hours here. If you don't feel I'm authentic, you're going to walk away with the feeling that, whatever she said was very, very bookish. I think some amount of communication training is good enough for these kind of organizations to ensure that you have stories which reach the last mile and they're open enough. We started an email that if you have any issues, I promise you this is an anonymous one. So people started writing in, and the more independently you do it through a consultant or through an external email ID, I do find employees writing in rather than their own leadership. If these opportunities are available and there is a low budget company with no tech investments or HRMSs, I request each one of you to please implement it in your own small level. It is implementable and you will get feedback from your employees. Everybody wants to be heard. You just need
You just need to find a medium, I guess.
Yeah, so it's not important to have a high-tech environment to get a grievance.
Exactly.
It's just about, I'm available, let me know. Prove it to them that give me a tat and I will respond back and I will resolve for you. That's good enough for an organization to see the difference.
I remember just sharing before Suchi gives in. I remember that I started my career in 1997, and I had this leader who used to always keep his cabin door open, fully open. So he told me, this is my way of saying that I am available for any conversation at any point of time. It was just a small gesture of keeping your cabin door open. It was a glass cabin. He doesn't really have to keep it open, but it was his gesture of showing that I'm open for conversation. You want to have a cup of coffee? I have 2 cups here ready. Just come, walk in and talk to me. So it's such subtle messages going through. Suchi, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, possibly I'm going to actually, Savita and the others, I'm going to actually say something on the other side, because it's important to always widen our perspective and know the reality that we are in, right? So when we talk about mid-size organizations, and even small organizations, okay, let's look at, and when I look at technology organizations, mid-size, small startups, scale startups, all different kinds, what is important is to lead with the intent. And wherever I have seen organizations lead with the intent, I have seen them, and especially technology organizations, because there's so much of avenues available in technology today. It is not just about putting a huge ERP in place, right? One is, of course, SaaS opportunities are there. And thankfully today, there are so many options that based on affordability, organizations are adopting. So what's the point that I'm saying? What organizations are realizing, be it small or be it the mid-size organizations, it's important to drive transparency and consistency. Yes. And as a result, what they're doing is, it doesn't matter what shape and form the technology takes, but they're using and leveraging some form of technology to be able to drive that. Why? Because accessibility is important. All right. That's one thing I want us to know, that organizations are doing it. Now, I will take on this just in case, if, for example, there is nothing that is available. Today, at least, what is available are, what I'm seeing are people using hotline, email IDs that are available. And as a result, doing that communication, saying, hey, this is a hotline, right into that. And that's where when Shanta says there's somebody who's held accountable, saying, have you responded to the person within 6 hours, 5 hours, whatever is the tat that has been put in, actually goes a long way to communicate the intent. The third part of it, what is important, the survey is just one method of it. What is important is, where is it? Remember, I talked to you about the role modeling. This is what role modeling and how you recognize signs of disrespect. And that's where the role modeling, the communication, that some of these things are not taboo, being able to talk about it and making that a mainstream conversation as a part of project reviews. So this is where I've seen organizations, and I consult with organizations and actually observe how many organizations or leaders are doing it. Taking 10 minutes into an agile sprint to say, okay, how did we do as a team? What are the signs of possibly collaboration where it did not happen well? What are the reasons for it? The leaders possibly taking the lead. And when I say leaders, these are project managers, and these are people with possibly 8 years, 9 years of experience who have been trained to actually look for this. This is how they are actually creating a community of safe and inclusive workplace. So that's what I would just like to add to this topic that we are discussing. Or the question, rather.
Thank you so much. I think that's a perspective that we also should very importantly pay attention to. One last question I can see is, I think what Shanta spoke about it. Let me read it out. Both these industries have a component of our employees being at client location. So how do we safeguard our employee interest when they are not in our premises? I think this was also alluded to when it was mentioned that BFSI salespeople do travel. In IT as well, employees sit in client offices many a times.
So maybe what I'll do is, Smita, I'll take this with one of the best practices which you were asking for is possibly going to address this. But before that, what I want to actually possibly reinforce is, as a part of the HR responsibilities in the technology organizations, in the HR structure itself, the HR BP organization have actually responsibilities aligned to actually take care of employees who are there in the client location. There are employee engagement matrix where it's actually said, how many people have you met? What are the issues that is there? Now, let me share a best practice that I found very useful, and I really loved the way they are doing it, okay? So this is something that I learned during one of my client engagement experiences, and this is a South Asian family-run enterprise, and they have a business interest in technology. So the technology part of the arm has around 1,600 employees. Now, what they are doing is not, again, it will possibly address Savita's question as well. They're actually embarking on this whole principle of safety and respect through culture. All right. And what they're doing, and being a South Asian family, their whole aspect about strong mentoring model across hierarchy levels is what they're strengthening. And one of the themes that they're focusing on is to build an organization consciousness about two things, all right? The difference between earned respect and owed respect.
Okay. Can you explain that a little more? Earned respect.
Absolutely. And I found it intriguing, right? And how one goes about their work responsibilities while displaying both. So, owed respect is a kind that is accorded equally to all members or a work group. So all their policies, how they drive the internal interpersonal communication, right? Engagement with clients, they actually talk about this. And they say, this is how, if, for example, the question saying, if I have my employee in your client location, hey, Mr. or Miss Client, please know that this is something that is one of our values. So we treat our employees in this manner. So if your employees, if our employees in your location, we would expect you to work with these as a fundamental way in the way you interact with our employees. So it's always respect means that you are part of my family. So as a result, I will treat you the way I treat my family. So that is a given. The earned respect is where it's more about saying, this is where performance management, this is where how you leverage training, how do you necessarily focus on raising your hand to take on additional responsibilities. So the earned respect is essentially proven by the way you perform, proven by the way you showed up. And what I found across teams, and this is across, they have project teams, right? It actually encourages open communication, active listening, divergent thinking, right? And as a result, what I observed is that the stress levels, which is otherwise would have been there because of these issues of respect and stuff, doesn't exist. And what happens is, as a result, whenever there are aberrations, it immediately catches your attention because the outliers are so visible. And what happened in that organization, and what I'm seeing, and I have been observing this organization for 6 months now, the number of innovative ideas, the level or the sense of belongingness that employees have with that organization is huge. So when you're looking at tenure, you're not looking at tenure just years of service. It's about tenure of how you're contributing to it. So I just thought I'll share this so that it helps.
This is brilliant. Brilliant example, Suchi. I mean, coining term for it is also very important. Somewhere I think we might be doing it in bits and pieces, but bringing it together and putting it out there is also so important. Yeah.
So Sweta, I'll just add on to Suchi. I thought the when you were coining it, it actually is a practitioner's viewpoint. It does happen even in India, right?
Yeah, everywhere it's happening actually.
Yeah, it's actually happening. And I'm just going back in time. So in the regulatory environment of Reserve Bank of India, outsourcing is an agreement. I mean, it's already regulated and it's put out in black and white to every banker. So whenever you do anything in the outsourcing arena, first and foremost, you use outsourced resources for those resources which you cannot employ directly. And that's what the outsourcing agreement is all about. So when we use manpower of other organizations, whether it's a staffing engagement or whether we have a third-party provider in our branches, We have a very clear system in branches in BFSI, and I don't think it's any different in any bank. Is when you do a training program in the bank premises, in the branch premises, you invite all the outsourced people too. So in a way, you are part of the training of the cultural values of the organization on a partnership model at the branch level. So when you look at a client engagement process where our people sit in a client office, which is a question that someone asked, I just want to say that, once you sit in a client office, you're actually part of their culture. And so it's very important that you get to learn their culture either through a proper induction program or through a proper process. Because I think the biggest challenge for most people who sit in other people's premises is that they believe that they belong to that organization and they're just deputed here. And therefore, as one of our practices we did was, if we did a leader speak session, every outsourced employee was part of the leader speak session. It was not demarcated. So when she was coining these words, I think it's a great way to rephrase our own training programs or our own leader speak sessions as exactly the way that you've said it, Suchi. It happens. It's not that it doesn't happen. It's just the way you present it.
Absolutely. And what happens is, and I loved it beautifully because immediately it gives a sense of association. And the
Yeah.
moment you have an association, it puts the action orientation in somebody's mind.
It's like a daughter-in-law and daughter, that's how it is.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
As a daughter-in-law, once you walk into somebody's house, you're there now, you're their family. Yeah? You learn their culture. If it suits you, great. If you can't, then you just walk out, right? Or you align, one of the two, as long as it's not abusive.
So there is pull and push all the time also. Having said that, we get a lot of times they're called vendor employees. I think we should get rid of those words which kind of make people feel different. So whenever we also have, we have 500 our employees and 500 vendor employees. So can we start calling it that we have 1,000 employees? Yeah. Okay.
So what they do, and Smita, and that's a very important point, because what most organizations that I've seen now, and being part of Cognizant and all, because these are large organizations, right? Most of the people actually call them as partner.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
The
Actually,
word vendor is gone. It's actually partners,
vendor
right?
is
And
gone.
gone. Yeah.
Because even the agreements say partnership.
Partners. But still, Shanta, Suchi, that, because we
The
speak to
colloquial, yeah, the language
still
still
there.
is
Actually,
vendor.
we
So
say
which,
third
yeah.
party provider. And let me tell you, in BFSI, we say third party provider because the outsourcing agreements which are made, there's also a regulatory angle to everything that we say or do, right? So while we believe they are partners in progress, it's sad. It does happen. It does happen. I don't want to take
So
away.
that stems, Shanta and Shuchi, that stems the thought process of the employer, senior leadership to treat them differently. And then they are they are sitting here, but they are part of different organization. So that that stickiness or that loyalty or whatever you call it doesn't come. That affinity doesn't come. So I think that's a long way to go. And
Sorry to cut you, but let me tell you, we went through this, and we actually what we did was we hired some of them inside the company.
lovely. Yeah.
So we actually did that, although, and we did a deal with the partner that to say that, we would be taking these people in-house because we did suffer this path. We were a mesh of cultures, right? So we wanted to make some stories. And we really found some of the third party, outsourced, vendor, whatever you might want to call them, partner resources, even better than some of the people that we had hired directly. So I think it's all about how you want to build a culture of inclusion, and acceptance. So I think it's just a process.
So respect there also dwindles, because then while at the face of it, whatever your body language, the way you're talking to them, everything comes. It's not only words or emails or that, it is also your body language, how you speak to them, how do you look at them, how do you treat them, all that comes in. So I think we are almost at the end of the conversation. I would want one quick bite from the two of you about any specific message that you want to leave this group with about. I think it was a full power conversation. I'm sure the technology team and the BFSI team are feeling, they got a peek into what organizations that you worked with, what are those best practices, what respect and safety means, why is it important? It shouldn't be something that is disassociated with employee productivity, because that is how the language otherwise stems from. It comes from that thought process. So I wanted to ask y'all if y'all can put in your final thought processes and what do you want to leave this group with?
Can I go in first, Suchi?
Of course.
See, girls and boys, jobs are plenty. Talent is scarce. If your personal and professional values don't match, that's not the organization for you. Just walk away. Toxicity of culture is not a great practice, because you spend out of 24 hours, almost 12 hours at work, or in and around that, it's 14 hours sometimes. Is it worth spending your day? Because after 30 years, I don't want to regret that what did I do with my life when there's a bigger life over and above just work in a toxic culture. So make your choices early, because there's a long future ahead for all of you.
Wow.
All right, I'll go next. So I will put the dimension as first, know yourselves, know your boundaries. Because what happens is many times when we are not aware of our own boundaries, we get very overwhelmed. Because at the end of the day, we all have our coping strategies and coping mechanisms. So what I would invite all of us to think about, can you necessarily really know a lot about yourself first? So that when you're faced in situations of overwhelm, all of us are going to face that. You can make the right choices that is going to help you do what Shanta said. Because all the time you're going to be faced on those choices. And it's important not to make emotional choices, but to make the right choices. And that is important only when you know yourself enough. So spend the time, and most of the times we don't do that. Know about your life experiences that are shaping your choices. So as a result, self-regulation on some of these elements is possibly the thought that I would leave with. And it's going to give you a lot of discoveries where you can find yourself being those change agents, because the organizations need change agents.
Absolutely.
And you are at an elevated level of self-regulation, you can be that.
Absolutely. Many a times people sitting at the top are not even aware what is happening. So I think call out, be the change agent, be the ambassadors, and knowing your boundaries. Actually, Suchi, we spend a lot of time in helping people to understand what are those boundaries, communicating it. Okay, because many a times we know our boundaries, but we are not communicating it well enough. So communicate those boundaries, and if the culture is toxic, if you don't feel respected, then as Shanta rightly says, there's no point in wasting your time there. You have better, the world is yours. You have to just seize it. So thank you very much, Shanta, Suchismita. I've never had such an interactive conversation. Sorry about my bandwidth, so I couldn't be on video for really long, but thank you so much. I think I'll close with that.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. So Shanta, thank you. As
Thank
always,
you.
a pleasure listening to you.
Same here. It was wonderful. I hope the audience enjoyed it too.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Be
Bye.
safe and respectful.
Yes.
That's true.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.